Okay, we're up to today's daf is Samechei Amid Aleph, and we're in an interesting sugya about the halacha of schia by a cotton. So the Gemara had gone ahead and suggested, right? There's a Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav Asi, we make a distinction between a cotton who can discern between a rock and a nut, and a cotton if you give a chayfetz, an object, and he can return it in an hour. The first one, he can be zoicha for himself, but not for somebody else. The latter, he can be zoicha for even somebody else. Shmuel disagreed. He said either way, whether the case of the rock nut or the case of watching an object and returning it, either way, he's limited to himself. He can't be zoicha for somebody else. The Gemara asks from the case of shitufei muvais, where we see an Ome Evriya has to be a katana, because if she's not a katana, she's a naira, she's already free. So it must be when the Mishnah in Eruvin says regarding being a partnership in a mavoi, that would be accomplished by being zoicha in one barrel of wine or some other food in a chutzner. It can be accomplished through Ome Evriya. It must be Ome Evriya katana. So you see, she's not in zocha for herself, she's zocha for whoever the individual is. So you see, a cotton can be zoicha. Kasha on Shmuel, and for the Gemara, that's the Rabbanon. That's the Rabbanon, it's not the Raisa. The Rabbanon, it could be Mizaka of somebody else, the Raisa you can. Says the Gemara, I called it the Tikkun Rabbanon came the Raisa Tikkun. That's only where it has a basis from the Torah. Masha Ein Kain, where this, even though Haitzah from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid does have a basis in the Torah, Haitzah from Rishus to Rishus does not have a basis in the Torah. Thus, by a Din Rabbanon, one can be Mizaka another if you're a cotton. Now we're going to ask a question from Maisa Sheni. The halacha of Maisa Sheni is that if a person has an abundance of crops and it's very hard and tedious to go ahead and transport it to Yerushalayim where Maisa Sheni must be eaten, he's able to take the worth of those crops and put it on a coin. However, when he redeems that coin, he has to redeem it for the if it's his crop, he has to redeem it for his amount plus a chaimish. In other words, when he redeems it, when he goes ahead and puts the food on that coin, let's say it's costs $100, it will be $125, $20 to $25, depending if it's milabar, okay. However, if another individual goes ahead and redeems it, they only have to give face value. They don't have to add the surcharge of the chaimish. So the Mishnah in Maisa Sheni says a person can make a harama, a trick, going ahead and avoiding that surcharge by giving money to his children, even his Amma Evriya, his female slave, and she can be zoicha for him. She was zoicha for herself and give it over to him. So you see that what by a din Rabbanon, right? But even by a din Raisa, such as Maisa Sheni, where she is going ahead and acquiring it and being mizaka it, right? The Ramban says she's kind of from Hegdish and she's mizaka it to her master, even though she's a katana. So you see by a din Raisa, one can go ahead and be mizaka, and that's the kasha. Says the Gemara. Masar Rav Avya, Samechei Amid Aleph, 4 lines down. Masar Rav Avya, Marimim al Maisa Sheni, you can go ahead and make a trick and avoid the surcharge of the fifth by Maisa Sheni. Ketzad, Oimer Adon Lebinoi, Ubita Hagadoilim, La'avdoi, Shivchasai Ivrim, Halachem Mois Halalu, Poidabit Maisa Sheni. Here's this money be poided without adding the surcharge of a fifth. Now, Hai Shivcha Hechidami, this Shivcha, what exactly are we discussing? This Shivcha. Ida Asya Beis Sa'arois. If she went ahead and bought 2 sarais, meaning she's no longer a katana, she is now a naira, she's 12, she has the simanim of a naira, which ostensibly is 12 in a day. But if she brings sarais, it's earlier, my boy Gabe, what she's still doing in this jurisdiction, she should be free by now. Elalav, it must be the loyasib beis sarais. She didn't bring stage sarais, and therefore she's a katana. And nonetheless, as a katana, by a din the rice of Maisa Sheni, she's able to be mizak of somebody else. Kasha on Shmuel, hachamayaskino b'maisa b'zman hazeh. Right, the Rabbanon. The speaking about this Maisa Bisman said the Rabbanon. In other words, in this day and age, where Maisa Sheni, there's no Yerushalayim, Kedush Yerushalayim, when it's eaten, it's only the Rabbanon in nature, and therefore, we stated before, by Din the Rabbanon, such as Shetuvim Mavais, one was able to go ahead and be Mizaka. So to over here, it's speaking about Maisa Sheni the Rabbanon. But Einochinami, the Raisa, she would not be able to go ahead and be Mizaka for her master. Fred the Gemara, Omer Vriya Bisman said Miyika. You're telling me it's speaking Bisman Hazeh, it's the Rabbanon. If it's Bisman Hazeh, there is no Amar Avriya. good, there's Ma'aser Sheni Midrabanan. But just like there's no Ma'aser Sheni Deraisa, there's no Omer Vriya Bechlal. But Tanya, ein Eved Ivri Noyeg Ela B'Zman Sha'Yovel Noyeg. The halacha of an Eved Ivri is only Noyeg in the time where Yovel is in vogue. Okay, we discussed this before. We'll do it again. One of the components of an of a Eved Ivri is that if 6 years he wants to stay with his master because he's married to a Shifcha Kananis, which he can't be married to as a regular Jew, he wants to stay in bondage. So he would go ahead and he would go to the Bezdin, and they would go ahead and all him in his ear, and that's called a nirtza. He stays in that state until Yovel. Once Yovel comes, he goes free. We learn from there that the whole halachas of Eved Ivri, and we make a hekesh Eved Ivri Amar Vriya to Eved, is only when Yovel's noyeg. Yovel has not been in vogue since Ruvain, Gad, and Chatzi Sheva Menashe was sent out. In other words, we're familiar with last week's parsha. Ruvain, Gad, and Chatzi Sheva Menashe settled in Ever HaYarden. The rest of the Shvatim went to their respective nachlais in Eretz Yisrael. The only time Yovel is noyeg is when every single one of the Shvatim is in their nachla. When Ruvain, Gad, Chatzi Sheva Menashe were even put into Golus before the Asara Shvatim of the north in Eretz Yisrael. At that time, Yovel stopped being noyeg. Frag the Gemara, what kind of teretz are you giving me? If you're telling me it's speaking of Ma'aser Sheni B'Zman Hazeh, and what? Since it's the Rabbanon, the Omer Vriya could be Zaycha. Hey, there is no Omer Vriya. It's no Yovel. Gavalda Kasha. Gavalda. Mamisha, bomb Kasha. Says the Gemara, you're right. You knocked me out. Ella, it's speaking Ba'otzat Shein Anakiv the Rabbanon. Again, another concept we're familiar with. If you have a flower pot that does not have a hole in the bottom, so it's not being nurtured directly from Eretz Yisrael, right? Therefore, the din of Trumas and Mais is only rabbinical in nature. It's only the Rabbanon. And that mitzias, where you have the Rabbanon, then an Omer Vriya could be Zoicha and then Mais Sheni from that flower pot. Masha'en Kain, if it was the Raisa and it was connected, let's say it was Nakov, then not. So the same teretz we gave before as Shituvim Voice. Amar Rava concludes this sugya with 3 dargis regarding a cotton in the din of Schia and Kinyonim, regarding being able to acquire something. Gimel midas b'cotton, the 3 madregas by a cotton, srar v'zarkoi, egas v'noiloi, rak, throw away, not take, zoich la'atzmo, he can be zoich for himself, vein zoich la'achein, but he can't be zoich for others. Ukinegdon, and paralleling the cotton would be a katana, shemiskadeshes limion. We know that if a father has the ability to mekadesh his daughter deraisa when she's a katana. If a father dies, and we're worried about the chastity of the katana, what the Chachamim did, they made a takana that the brother and or mother could be mekadesh kedushi derabanan. However, it's weak in nature to the extent that if before she's a naira, she wants to refuse the marriage, mion, right? Then you would not need a get, right? We're familiar from Masechta Yevamis, a famous picture of the girl going like this, right? Refusing the marriage, right? Anyway, so parallel, that would be a parallel in age. Male takes the rock, throws it away, and Katana would do the same thing. She would be able to accept Kedushi D'Rabbanan. She would be able to do Mion. Okay? Haputois is 6 to 8 years old. We had this earlier in Perikan Zaken regarding business transactions. If a girl is between 6 to 8 understands to the extent memcha, the purchase is a purchase, memchore mimkar, and the sale is a sale. However, that's dafka b'metaltalin, not karka. We said paralleling that would be ukinegnan b'katana is miskareshes b'kedushi avia. She will be able, the father's kedushin, which is the rabbanon. She would, if she is able to go ahead and understand business transactions to that extent, she'd be in the madrega of accepting having a yad to makabel her get, even though it's kedushin deraisa. A third madrega la'oines nedarim. We said where the neder of a katana is a neder, that would be a mufla samach leish, be it what the male at 12 in a day, the girl at 11 a day, a year before our 13, 12. The dereim neder, it's good neder, v'ekdesh and hegdish, nemagdish something is hegdish, u'kinegdam, b'katana will be chaletzes. We know that it says in the parsha of Yibum Ish, and therefore a chalitza is not done by a katana. Of course, we make a hekesh between Ish and Isha. However, when she reaches the madrega of understanding the Dorim at the din of 11 in a day, she will be able to perform chalitza as well. So this is just like a summary statement in the sugya of sechia and understanding and conceptually being able to go ahead and perform certain mitzvahs in Judaism. However, regarding selling of property, ad sheyi ben esrim, you have to be 20 years old. Meaning, you're bar mitzvah, you're 15, you're 16, you're 17, you're 18, you're royal to be drafted to Vietnam, right? Nonetheless, your sale is not a sale. Why? Listen to this Ran, Geschmack Ran. Says the Ran that until a person's 20, he doesn't understand transactions to the extent that he may undersell the karka. People may take advantage of him, and therefore he would go ahead and sell it for less than it's worth, and therefore he lose the karka. So to ensure that when the sale goes through that he didn't get taken advantage of, we wait till 20. The Ran therefore makes a wonderful chilik. This is only regarding a karka that came to him not through his own action. So if he inherited karka, he didn't work for it, he didn't purchase it, he doesn't understand what the concept of what it is. He may be we're worried he may be ripped off, and therefore we won't let him sell till he's 20. Masha'enkin, let's say he was astute enough, had the business acumen to go ahead and purchase it himself, then even before 20, says the Ran, his sale will be a sale, because obviously he understands business, and therefore his sale will be a sale. Because again, he purchased it, so obviously he understands what karka is worth. Very nice distinction to make Bechalik in the Gemara in this last thing. Okay, beautiful Gemara. Next Gemara, says the Mishnah. Kitana Sham is Giti, a katana that says to a person, be makabel my get, and the husband goes ahead and gives the get, ain't a get. Ashigia get liyad. It's not a get till it reaches her hand. The fikach and ratza bal lachser yachser. If the Baal wants to change his mind, he can change his mind. Here we know by a regular shliach lekabbalah, once it gets to a hand, it's finito, it's finished. Nonetheless, by a katana, since she can't make watch, ain't cotton oisa shliach. Since she or he is not in the ballpark of shlichus, the mela the shliach lekabbalah is not a kabbalah. All he is a transport, and therefore she be only divorced when it reaches her hands. If the father would say save his kabbalah biti gita, he would make the shlich lekabbalah. Then because the father can be makabel the get, but who adin shlucho shaladim kamoso, he could go ahead and make a shliach to be makabel the get. Okay, person says, listen, give this get to my wife in Detroit. Give this get to my wife in Detroit. And he gives the get in Los Angeles. He says, I'm making you a shliach to give the get to my wife in Detroit. He gives the get in Los Angeles, puzzle. It's not a good get. He only made him a shliach for Detroit. In other words, when he gave the get in Los Angeles, there's no nesina. In other words, we know v'nasam v'chasal sefer krisis v'nasam biyada. One of the components of get is you have to go ahead and physically give it over. Good. If you're not a shliach, your nesina is not a nesina. It would be like her picking the get off the ground. Memela, it's puzzle. He said, it says over here, not only it doesn't work, he said the get is puzzle. That's interesting. However, he says the following: Harihi b'makam ploni v'nasla b'makam acher kasha. If a guy says to a shliach, go give my wife, she's in Detroit, and then he gives us in Los Angeles, it's kasha. He was making a shliach. He was just saying, I think right now, you know where she is? In Detroit. He was being a GPS. He wanted to say, you know where you're going to find her? In Detroit. He wasn't limiting the shlichus and saying you're only a shliach in Detroit and not Los Angeles. He's saying you're a shliach, period. And where is she now? She's in Detroit. Memela, if you find her in Los Angeles, you were a shliach all along. The get is kasha. Nice distinction between the two cases. Says the Gemara, a woman says that what to makabel the get, but Makan Ploini, be makabel my get in Detroit. The kibbutz and Makam Acher, and he's makabel the get in Los Angeles. Puzzle. The get is puzzle. Again, the Tanakama does not make a distinction between the shliach loyalacha of the Baal and the shliach kabbalah of the woman. However, Rebbe Lazar says no. By halacha, I agree with you. By kabbalah, I disagree. By shliach kabbalah, as we're going to see in the Gemara, she can't call the shots. So wherever she gets the get, whether Detroit or Los Angeles, she's divorced. Habali Giti, if a woman says, bring me my get, not to be a shlich kabbalah, but a shlich la'aba, right? And you bring it from another place, you will be kosher. Now, we have a kasha on Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar agreed by the shliach la'elacha that he's only a shliach in Detroit. He's not a shliach in Los Angeles. Yet by the Isha, he said, even though she said be makabel in Detroit, he's a shliach across the board, even in Los Angeles. Where do you get this distinction by the male and the where he doesn't argue, and the female where he does argue? Ma'aseh Shefer the Polig, says the Gemara. Ma'aseh Reish the Polig, Ma'aseh Shefer the Polig, and for the Gemara, Iu the Midaiti Megarish, he who calls the shots, the man can only divorce with his das. And again, guys, this is before the Cherem Rabbeinu Geshin, where you're able to divorce a woman against her will. Megar Kopit, you would be makbid, and he's makbid on Detroit and not Los Angeles. Ihi the Bal Korcha Miskareshes, she can't call the shots. Wherever he gives it to her, she can't make a Kabbalah dafka of Detroit and not Los Angeles. She can make a shliach Kabbalah. And you went ahead and said Detroit now, Mara Makam Hilai. What is she simply doing? She's simply being Mara Makam. She's simply saying that this is where you will find my husband. This is where you'll find the shliach. He'll give you the get in Detroit. But not that she's limiting the shlichus to Detroit and not Los Angeles. She's being Mara Makam. That's the chiddush of Rebbe Laza. That's the chiddush of Rebbe Laza. Says the Mishnah. If a woman says Havali Giti, okay, just a little information. Again, something we're familiar with. Yavamis was a very comprehensive Masechta. It's amazing how many times you go back to it. Not just the Zika cases, but Perak Oral. What's the halacha? If a woman is a Yisrael and Bas Yisrael and she marries a Kayin, she eats truma as long as she's married to him. If she has children, she will continue to eat truma. If she has no children, she goes back to daddy's house, right? Good. Now, a woman says, bring me my get. Bring me my get. She's a Bas Yisrael and she's eating truma. How long can she eat truma for? Says the Mishnah, she get liyada. She eats truma. You know why? Because she is married to the kayin until the get comes back. Hiskabali giti. However, if she says be makabel my get, now asur lecha b'truma miyad. You know why? Because maybe as soon as the shliach Kabbalah left the city limits, who was there? The husband, and he gave her the get. And therefore, we have to go ahead and take into consideration. Perhaps she's no longer married to the kayin, and so shlich haba bring the get until she gets the get. Shlich Kabbalah asa miyad. Right. Hiskabali giti, and she adds b'makam plani bibu makabel my get in Detroit. Aicheles b'truma ashiyagia get loisa makam. Okay, so you go ahead. You know that the shliach is on the Greyhound going to Detroit. You go ahead, look at the schedule. How long does it take to get from New York to Detroit? And she'll be able to eat truma in that window. Because certainly she's not any get she gives now is not going to work. It's mashma fellas, however, the get when she would come to, in other words, this is the Gemara to make this diak. Let's say she says that you're shlich kabbalah to Detroit, gets on the Greyhound, and guess who's on the Greyhound? The husband gives it a get. What's the halacha? Not divorced yet. Why? Didn't get to get in Detroit. Remember, Tanakama says, previous Mishnah, you could make a limitation in the place. Mashma, however, when the Greyhound reaches Detroit, she will be divorced. Kasha from the previous Mishnah that said it's puzzle. Puzzle meant the get was puzzle. That's going to be the question. What would Rebbe Laza say over here? Rebbe Laza says that what? Immediately you won't be able to eat, because you can't go ahead and limit your shlichus to Detroit, your maramakim. And consequently, that's what he says. Rebbe Laza, yas immediately. Rebbe Laza, lishitasai, that you can't make a shlicha for a certain place, and that's it. Fred the Gemara, the get, it's a good get. In other words, in our case of the Greyhound, leaves right away. It's only a get when he gets to Detroit. In the Mishnah before, it said what? That the get is puzzle. According to the Tanakama fellas, if you make her a shliach to makabel get in Detroit and she's makabel in Los Angeles, it's puzzle. How can you explain therefore this Mishnah that when you get to Detroit, it's kasha? So the Gemara Mishnah is going to say it's speaking in a nukimta. Very often, when the Gemara, because of the kasha, we will go ahead and establish that the Mishnah is speaking in a specific instance. That's called an okimta. When you have this specific instance, so as long as it answers the kasha, it answers the kasha. Again, this is a very important thing. I always say it all the time. The Gemara is the ultimate truth. It's the ultimate truth. In other words, when the Gemara goes ahead and says Shema, asks the question and says Shema Mina, that means you've exhausted every possibility to answer up the Gemara, and you have to conclude that this is the truth. So over here you have a kasha. What's a kasha? How do you make a distinction between the previous Mishnah where it says the get is puzzle because you can only make a get? She can even make a get for a limited area. And the second Mishnah is mashma. No, the Kabbalah is not limited. The Kabbalah is limited to that area. But once you get to that area, it works. How do you explain that? So we're going to come up with a way of explaining the latter Mishnah. What's that way? It says, it's speaking, the Amrulay, the Isha told the Shliach, listen, Hiskabali Gita b'masam machasya. Go ahead. Let's say Detroit, okay? Masam machasya, we'll translate it. Art School does not translate as Detroit, but Rabbi Stern will. So now, Hiskabali Giti b'masam machasya. B'makabel we get in Detroit. That's what she said. However, v'zin in the Mishkachas of Bavel, and sometimes you'll find him in Los Angeles. In other words, we're saying it's not exactly the same case. She didn't say only Mikabel to get in Detroit. She's saying be Mikabel in Detroit, and sometimes, guess what? He's in Los Angeles. So obviously from her words, what do you see? She's not limiting to Detroit. And therefore, this is what she's telling the Shliach. Wherever you find it on the base, wherever you find it, right? Find it and take it from him. However, but it won't be a get till you get to Detroit. Mamish case on the Greyhound. Wherever you find it, take the get. You got on the bus, he was there, take the get. But you won't be divorced until you actually get to Detroit. Okay, nice husband. Detroit, Los Angeles works better than Makamacha and Muppin Plain. In pedagogically. Says the Gemara. Gita lehavi adamat l'masam chashem. Rebbe Loza oisa miyad. Rebbe Loza says that since Rebbe Loza says the woman does not have the power to make a shliach kabbalah any which way he wants, right? Any which way he wants, he doesn't have a shliach, can't do that. Then what? Obviously, as soon as, even though you said, guess what? He's in Detroit now, but sometimes he's in Los Angeles, right? That's what I was saying. Nonetheless, she can't, and he'd be only divorced to Detroit. She doesn't have that power. All she can say is, you're shliach kabbalah. I think he's in Detroit, and wherever you get, you're divorced. Therefore, should be also the truma miyad, because maybe as soon as she got on the Greyhound, the guy was there. Pshita, the maramakam ulay. What's the chiddush? So like tzricha, the amrulay zil lemizrach. You know what she told him? She told him the following. She said to him, the shliach, right? Zil lemizrach, go to the east. The isim mizrach, because my husband's in the east. And you know what? The ka'azal lemayriv. And so, lo and behold, the shliach his sense of direction, to put it mildly, left a lot to be desired. And instead of going to the east, he went to the west. Guess who he met in the west? The Baal. And she said the shliach's in the east. Now, the ka'azal b'mayriv, and he meets him in the mayriv. Somehow the tema I would have thought, u'b'mayriv halesa, the Baal is not there at all. And he's not meaning, and therefore, you're not a shliach at all for the west. Kamash malon. Dilma bahadid ka'azla, megas goyas, he'll meet up with him, the Yov Lagita. So that's the chiddush, that even though she specifically gave a direction, and there's a svara to say that he wasn't in direction, therefore it should not be a get. Therefore it should not be what? A get at all. In other words, it should be, I didn't say a get at all, that she should be able to eat truma. Again, on the concern of is eating truma. So I'm going to thought the following. You're telling me as soon as you leave the city, that you can't eat because you're going to meet up with him. The chiddush is that even though there's a svara to say you won't meet up with him, why? Because you said he's in the east, he went to the west. If he went to the west, I assume you have a certain window of that you could eat, because again, he's not in the west. Kamash malon, that maybe when the guy is going from west to east, you're going to meet up with him, and therefore it's asa miyad. That's the chiddush, that even though it's a very small possibility to meet him immediately, like Rabbi Loza, we're chayish for that small possibility, and therefore she's also the truma miyad. Someone says what? Guy says the following. Now there's halacha in Eruv, right, that we're familiar with, that a person can only walk 2,000 amas on Shabbos. It's called Tchum Shabbos. So if you have this is a city. This is a city, you would get 2,000 amas to the west and 2,000 amas to the east. Let's say you have to go 3,000 amas this way or 4,000 amas this way. You go ahead at the 2,000 amas mark, you'd put a mazon of 2 sudos, and that would extend from that point on 2,000 amas. You would lose the 2,000 amas from here. In other words, you'll get 2,000 here, 2,000 here. If you extended 4 over here, you would not be able to carry it all. You're able not to walk out at all over here. Good. So now the guy says to a shliach, make my suda from dates, and he makes it from figs, and vice versa. That's what's under discussion. Okay, that's all we're discussing now. So says the Gemara. Someone says to a shliach, Orav li, make an erev tchumim, but tomorrow using dates. The erev loy begroigris, and he went ahead and used figs. So he didn't listen. Begroigris, he told him make figs. The erev loy betamarim, and he used dates. So we have a machlokes whether it's a good erev, whether it's good erev tchumim or not. Tani chada eruvay erev. One brisa says it works. I mean, the shlichas did the job. The Tani idach ain't eruvay erev, and the other one says what? It's not a good erev. Why do we bring this in? Rabbi, how do you go ahead and answer the stiris and brises? One saying it is a good erev, one saying it's not. Harabanon, harebalaza. The Rabbanon who said you're a shliach to Detroit and not a shliach in what? In Los Angeles. Who are then you're a shliach for dates and you're not a shliach for figs, or vice versa. Like Rebalaza, that you just maramokin, that just like you're a shliach in Detroit, you're a shliach what? In Los Angeles. Who are then you're a shliach for making an erev, right? And therefore he's just telling use this, but if you use this, it's okay. That we want to say, and that's when we brought this in. We want to say the machlokes that we have by get, and regarding designating a shliach is the same machlokes we have by make a shliach for Kabbalah would be the same machlokes by what? By erev. That's Rabbi's teretz. So Rabbi like Kasha, Rabbanon Rabbi Laza. Rabbanon, the one that said it's not a good erev is the Rabbanon, the Army Kpeda. He's makbid in Detroit. He's makbid on dates. The brisa that said it's a good erev is the Rabbi Laza, who said that the isha is not makbid. It's not makbid, and therefore what? Just like shliach in Detroit and Los Angeles, who are then for figs. Mara makom hilay, and therefore that's Rabbi. So Rabbi says hava hatalia. Rabbi Yosef has a different opinion. Hava both prices are Rabbanon. Both prices are Rabbanon. The Rabbanon who say that the Dafka Detroit and not Los Angeles would say by Eruv it would be a good Eruv. It's about both of the Rabbanon, right? So why do we have to answer up? If both Rabbanon, why by one place isn't it good and one place it is good? Kan, with the brisa that says it's a good Eruv, Bishaloi. The Tamarim he told the Shliach to use the Tamarim, and therefore the Shliach went ahead and took Gregris, since they all belong to him, great, no problem. The brisa that says it's not a good Erev is Bishal Chaveroi. He gave his Chaver Rishus to go ahead and take his dates. What happened? The Shliach went ahead and took the figs of his fellow friend. Of course, it's not good over there. It's not his figs. It's not his figs. So in other words, you're not limited to saying the machlokes of Detroit, Los Angeles between the Chachamim and Rebbe Laza is the same machlokes between yes erev, no erev when he changes from dates to figs. I could say it's Detroit, Los Angeles, according to the Chachamim, is in both cases. The one that says that it is a good erev. So what did he do? He went ahead. I want an erev. I told you tomorrow. So I was marrying you a mock to take tomorrow. You took dates, you took figs. 1 second, it's my figs, it's okay. More important to me is what? Is the Erev. Not so important is exactly what you took. Then why is another Bryson not a good Erev? Because you didn't take his crap, you stole. Basically, you took someone else's figs, and therefore it's no good. That's the way to explain it. Amalei Abaya, Belhaditanya. If you're telling me, Rabbi Yosef, that this is a good wad, this is a good chilik, so Amalei Belhaditanya. A person says to a shliach, Orvli Erev Techumim b'migdal. At the end of 2,000 amas, there is a tower. I want you to put the food in the tower. The Erev b'shoivach. And what did he do? He goes gets to 2,000 amas, and behold, not only is there a tower, but there's a dove coop. There's a shoivach. And what does the shliach do? He puts the food in the dove coop, and he doesn't put it in the migdal. or right, or the exact opposite. B'shoybech v'irulei b'migdal. The Tanya Chadash She'iru ve'erev. The Tanya Idach She'iru ve'erev. One says it's a good erev, and one says it's not a good erev, right? So Hasa Maishaloi B'Shel Chaverei Ikka. So guys, Bishleim, if you tell me like Rabba, the Machloikis by dates and figs is the same Machloikis between tower and coop. Loite Chachamim, that there's Akpada, that if he puts it in the different place, it's not a good erev. Loit Rebbe Lazar, that's Mara Makoim, just showing a place that even if he puts it in the different place, whether the coop or the migdal, it would be good. That's a good explanation. But Loit the Chachamim, Loit Reb Yosef, who wants to say the distinction between his and not his, how are you going to explain this case? The migdal is nothing to do with him or not him. It's not his migdal. The shoivach is not his shoivach. Bishleim of the food, you can make a distinction between his food and not his food. Over here, it's not his migdal either way. It's not his shoivach either way. So how in the world, Loit Reb Yosef, could you explain this? Loit Rabbi, I have a good explanation to make a distinction. Loit Reb Yosef, I don't. That's a biased kasha on Reb Yosef's pshat. So says the Gemara, Hasan Nami, there, it's not speaking about the migdal itself. It's speaking about food that you'll find in the migdal. Ika peri the migdal peri the shoivach. He says to the shliach, listen, I want you to go ahead. I have this fruit in the migdal. Use that. And he goes ahead and uses the shoivach. Oila hepech. Right. I said this pshat yesterday. That's not the pshat they say. Here's the pshat. They say very simply. This is like the case of a man saying, I want you to dafka be a shliach in Detroit and not a shliach in Los Angeles. Even Rebbe Lazar would agree by the man that you're limited to that place. So if the person said, I want you to use the peiros that are in the migdal, that are in the tower, he's makbid on the peiros in the tower, not to use the peiros in Shavach. In other words, the tower would be Detroit, and the Shavach would be Los Angeles. That's the way, simply, nothing to do with Shaloi or Shel Chaveroi, like I thought. It has to do, again, a simple explanation, right? That when he says migdal, he means you're only a shliach for Tchum in Detroit. And therefore, if you go to Shavach, Los Angeles, it doesn't work. That simply would be the pshat. Okay. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah. If a shliach says, "Kasvu get v'tnul ishti," write a get and give it to my wife, or says Gershua, right? Gershua, literally send her away. Kisvu igeres, write a letter v'tnula and give it to her. Hari elu yichtu v'yidnu. All these are l'shainis of get, guys. All these are l'shainis of get. Let's see Rashi here. Says the Mishnah. Kisu gefetnu leishti, lashim bnei adam hu, kvar hechziku boy likreis l'sefer krisus, isha get. In the Torah proper, you'd never find the word get. In the Torah proper, in Pashas Kiseitse, it does not say the word get. It says the chas of law sefer krisus v'nasan liyada. Give her a sefer of cutting. So therefore, if a person says, give a get to my wife, how do you know it means what? A get. How do you know it means a sefer krisus? And Rashi's answering, by the time the Mishnah was written, people were saying the word get for sefer krisus. This really, guys, it's a beautiful explanation. Do you remember by the Siyam Hashas, we brought in the first Tosfos in the Masechta that discusses why a get is 12 lines. It has 12 lines, so it's called a get, which is in Gematria 12, 9 and 3rd. 9. So in other words, it's an explanation, perhaps, how in the world over time did a sefer krisus become a get? So it could be, since it had 12 lines, to make it easier, sefer krisus is a long term. Hey, give a sefer krisus to my wife. And we saw that early in the Masechta that we're worried the guy, the funny nechtam, he may say a little too much. So perhaps that's pshat over here. They made a very concise word, get. That would be a nice explanation, right? So therefore, Rashi's telling you, by the time of the Chazal, when this was written, a sefer krisus was called a get. So if a person says, send the get to my wife, there's no question or suffix in doubt what he wanted it sent next. In addition, the word Gershuha, Gerishin, guys, Gerishin, the Rambam, Hilchas Gerishin. Gerishin means to send away, says Rashi. Nama kvar nagu likros Gerishin. Also, a get, not the Sefer Krisis, not only was it called a get, it was called Gerushin. So therefore, if a person says Gerusha, send her away, clearly there's no doubt. Finally, Hisvui Geres Vitnula, write a letter and give it to her. This would be very good with Mechel, right? That getting a letter could be what to get. Yes? Gamze Loshen Haget. That's also, says Rashi, a Loshen Haget. Shekoismin boy, well, the guys in the get. Here's the Loshen. Vidon dahavi lechi minoi. This should be from me to you. Sefer tiruchen, a sefer of banishment. V'igeresh shivukin, and a letter of sending away. So you see, Igeres also connotates get, and therefore it's no doubt in the Mela give the get. Back in the Mishnah. So Nachamal, Oimer, Kisvu get v'truli ishti, Kirshua, Kisvu Igeres v'trula, Harili yichtav yitnu, because there's no doubt in each case it means a get. However, Patrua, release her. You know what release her may be? Release her from her chayvis, potter. Not necessarily potter from me, maybe potter that what? Pay off her chayvis. Parnasua, go ahead and provide for her after I let her go. No, maybe it means provide for her, period. Asula kenimus, do according to the law. Which law? Maybe not the law of get, maybe some other law. Asla karoi, do the right thing. Layoma klum. In other words, these lashonis leave it open for a suffix that maybe you don't mean to get, and therefore you don't write it. In the first case, all those cases clearly meant get, right? That's what it means. There's no doubt. Mashenkin over here, there's a doubt, and therefore what? Tanrabana. Adding on a few more lashonis. Shalchua, send her away. Shavkua, abandon her. Terucha, banish her. Harielu yichtav yitnu. These are all the lashonis of get. Patrua, parnasua, pataha, provide for her. Asala kanimis. Asla karoi loyama klom. My mission. Tanya Reb Nassan Aimer. Reb Nassan, guys, is going to make a chilik between patruha and pitiruha. Okay, so what's the distinction? Reb Nassan Aimer, patrua devar of kayamin. If he says patruha, so that means what? She's divorced. Pitruha, right? Release her from debt. Loyama klum. So in other words, he makes the distinction. Our Mishnah said patrua not. Reb Nassan said patrua yes. What's the difference between Reb Nassan and us? Here's the difference. Amar Rava, Reb Nassan the Bavloihu, Reb Nassan was a Babylonian. And as a result of being a Babylonian, he was an expert in Hebrew and Aramaic. In Eretz Yisrael, they were only experts in Hebrew. V'dayik bein pitrua lipatruha. And he makes the distinction between pitrua, which is Hebrew, lipatruha, which is Aramaic. And therefore, pitrua is Hebrew, means pater from a debt. Patrua means Aramaic, means let her go. Good. Tanya Didon, the Eretz Yisrael, loy dayik. Tana Eretz Yisrael, and it could be they were experts in Aramaic, but they weren't medayik this distinction, and therefore Patrua would not let her go, would not be again. Iboilahu, a few other lashonis. Chaytziua, take her out. Mahu. Azvua, forsake her. Mahu. Hitirua, permit her. Mahu. Hinichua, leave her. Let her be. Mahu. Ha'ilulayu, help her. Mahu. Aslei kedas. Mahu. What's the din? Pashid miya chada. Let's be pashid. One of these questions, the Tanya. Aslei kedas. Aslei kenimus. Aslei karoi. Layam aklum. But the other lashonis remain a teku. Thank you for listening to this makeup.